In this course, Anya Kubo will teach you how to build 3 internal applications that are useful for many types of businesses. The applications focus on the needs of employees, managers, and developers. Anya is great at breaking things down and makes it simple to follow along when learning new concepts.
Hello, everyone here on FreeCodeCamp, looking to build 3 apps in 3 hours using Postgres, Stripe's API, as well as an emailing integration. My name is Anya Kubo, software developer as well as course creator online. And together we're going to build 3 internal tool applications that one business might use. We will build an application used by employees, an application used by managers, and an application used by developers, all linked to one database. So just like you might see when working for a real small to medium-sized company. Now, hold on, Anya, this seems super overwhelming. Well, don't worry, I'll be taking you through everything step by step, starting with an explainer and ending with 3 separate tutorials, leaving you with the confidence to build your own internal tools as well as some new business logic. So, by the end of this course, you will have these wonderful applications to run an e-commerce store from the backend or back office side. This is essentially what the operations team at a company will see. The application will display all items in our inventory that we can sell, and we will be getting this data from a database that we will build using Postgres. The data will be for mobile phones, with each item having a price, image URL, description, and unique SKU or identifier for data management purposes. The application will also allow us to manage the purchases made by customers. This means we will be able to search for orders and create refunds. The refunds will be done thanks to a Stripe API integration. On top of that, we will also be able to email customers with auto-generated text thanks to some custom JavaScript that we write, as well as the SMTP API. You will also be able to see all other employees in the company thanks to this tab right here. Next up, we will build the Managers app intended for admins of the company. So imagine that you are a manager and you need to view all the employees at your company as well as their private information. You might also need to delete someone from the database or edit their details, such as their title or address, for example. Well, you can do that here, as well as view the inventory too to delete items from the inventory and add new items to the inventory. Another nice feature we are going to add is the ability to see analytics of which employee is gaining the most revenue for your company. And finally, we will build a B2D app or business to developer application. This app will offer additional developer-friendly functionality. What this means is that the app will be able to facilitate orders made through API calls by displaying the endpoints right here, as well as a bunch of other stuff. Okay, so a lot to get through. I'm excited, let's do it. This course is made possible by a grant from Retool, the low-code platform built for developers. Retool has drag-and-drop tools and integrations to help developers build front ends for their internal apps right on top of APIs and data sources. In this course, we'll be using Retool's free plan, which is available for teams up to 5 people. Okay, so let's do it. I started off on the Retool platform, which is the platform I'm going to use in order to build these internal apps. And I'm just going to go ahead and create new from app. Okay, so let's go ahead and call out up something. I'm going to go ahead and call it Mobby, as that is my fake company's name. It's a mobile company. We're going to be making a mobile company's internal apps, and this is going to be the employee app. So just go ahead and do that. You can of course call it whatever you wish. And there we go. As you can see, this is just some default settings. We have a table in here, and we also have a query that has been set up for us in order to get going. However, I am going to delete this so we can start with a clean slate. So just go ahead and delete yours. And then I'm also going to delete this table simply by clicking on it and then pressing delete on your keyboards. Great. So now we have a clean slate. We can control which tabs we want to see up here. So here I can actually see the state of my queries, okay, when I get them. And we can also control seeing the tab down here, or we can minimize it, as well as this tab on here. which provides us with all our inbuilt components. So let's go ahead and do this. First off, I'm just going to create a container that's going to hold our tables, our order tables, our inventory table, and our employee table to show us, the employee, all of that data. So I'm just going to go ahead and call this order management dashboard, just like so. I'm going to choose to align it to the left like that. And then we can also choose a color for this container's header. So to do that, just make sure you're on the actual container itself. And then on the inspect tab, we can scroll down and we can give our header a background color. So I'm just going to go ahead and select one of these. I'm going to go with primary. And if we want to change it, we can just drag this just like so to make it a little bit lighter or darker. That is totally up to us. Okay, if we go lighter, the color will change a bit, but we can also override the default text color. I'm just going to keep it white as I think that looks good. Great. So we can change the header, we can change the footer if we want to add one to this. We can change the border radius, the border. There's literally so much that we can do. So perhaps while I'm here, I'm just going to go ahead and change the border radius of this to have the border color that is the same. Okay, so let's just go with this. I'm just going to drag it to be somewhere up here. Great. And then we can, of course, override it to be exact as well. Okay, so that's our first container. Now I'm going to use the tabbed component. So just this one right here and drag it in. And we're going to have different tabs. As I said, the first one is going to be to see all the orders. So let's go ahead and call this orders. We can even give an icon if we wish. So I'm just going to go ahead and just give it a little crown because they are one orders. So I think that is kind of cute. And then for view 2, we're going to have the inventory so that our employees can see the inventory in our shop. So inventory. And again, just choose an item. So I'm just going to go ahead with this one right here. That kind of makes sense for an inventory. And the third one I'm going to have is for employees. So the employees can also see other employees that work here. And here I'm just going to find one of a person. So just like so. Great. So now if I click on any of these, it should open a different tab. But of course, we need to put the content of that tab in here. So I know that the first one is going to be a table. So let's go ahead and drag that in. And this is the default information that is being fed to our table. We're going to delete all of this and actually feed in our data from a database. So just go ahead and delete that so we can start fresh. With the inventory, so if you click on here, I'm going to show all the products in our company. However, I'm going to choose to showcase another component for you, and that is list view, which will show us all the items as a list. So let's go ahead and search for list view. So I'm just going to drag that in here like so. And this is cool because we can now drag other components into here. So for example, if I drag an image, then we'll have loads of different images. This is kind of the equivalent of mapping in JavaScript. Okay, so let's have an image. I'm also going to have, let's put some text, for example. So we can put some text here. This could be a title. And then we can also have some text for a description if we wish, as well as maybe some other text for, you know, the price of the item, as well as how much we have of the product. So let's go ahead and put that here. So I've done that just so you could see how this is being mapped out to all the other list items. And our list items, so let's go ahead and select the list view component, are actually just hard coded to number 3, but we can of course change this dynamically too once we get our data feeding in. So we'll come back to this. Perhaps there's also, I'm just going to change this for now. We can use HTML elements in here if we want. So I can use the H2 tag, and this could be the product name, for example. So that is just an example of something we can do, or we can make it smaller if we want. So if we choose an H3 tag, that'll just be that tiny bit smaller too. Here we're going to have the price. So we can make it bold simply by using these two stars like so. So I can just put USD and just hard code this as 0 to start with, but we know that the price is going to go in here. Okay, and if we don't want to do it this way, we can also just put an H5 this time perhaps. Let's see what H5 looks like. Okay, so let's use an H5 element for that. And here we're just going to, again, I'm just going to use an H5 element for this just to keep it consistent on both sides visually. And let's go ahead and put the product ID as well as the stock level. So that is something that we will have here. And I'm just going to make that a little bit longer for us. So just like that. And of course, this is going to be a description of the product. So I'm just going to put, this is a description for now. Wonderful. So this is just for us to have an idea of what's going to go in here, what kind of data. Let's move on. The last one we're going to do is employees. And once again, for this one, I'm going to have a table. So let's go ahead and create and then find our table component and just drag it in here. At the moment, as I said, it has default data just hard-coded into here. So it's an array of objects. I'm just going to delete that so we can feed our own data in later on. Great. Now, the next thing I want to do is say that when we have our orders and when we select a line from the orders, we want to actually view the order visually along with the product pictures. So I'm just going to, for now, drag in another container. So just like so, and I'm going to get rid of the title this time. I don't want it there, and we can do so easily. So if we click on the container 2, and we can do so easily by simply hiding the header like so. Okay, great. So at the moment, we're just using the default names. However, we can change this. So perhaps let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to name this to management container, and let's change this to display container. This tabbed container, I'm just going to put management tab container. Okay, so there we go. And then I'm happy with all these tabs 1, tabs 2, tabs 3, that makes sense. And table 1, well, this is going to be for the orders. So let's go ahead and maybe change that. Order table, the inventory list. So this list view, I'm going to put inventory list. And the employees, I'm going to change this to, so just make sure to click on employees. That's table 2. Let's rename table 2 to be employees table. Just so that when people look at our code that we will be writing later, it will be more readable and make more sense. Okay, so there we go. We've renamed all these components. So feel free to do that. You, of course, don't have to. I just wanted to show you that it is possible. Okay, wonderful. So in here, when I click on a line, I essentially want to be able to view the order number. So let's go ahead and delete this. I'm going to use an H4 element for this time. So let's put the closing tag. And I'm going to put you are viewing order number. And then we're going to put the order number in here. Okay, so whatever it is, that will show up. Perhaps let's make this a little bit smaller while we're at it. I'm going to make this an H5 element. Great. Now, when we select an order, I essentially want the order to show up, right? But what if an order has more than one product? So for this, we're going to have to get the list view again, because we're going to map that data onto the list view. So just go ahead and drop that in here, drop that in the container, just like so. And in here, maybe let's rename this to something more readable. I'm going to go ahead and rename this to order list view. And in here, I'm just going to drag in the image of what the order is. So just like that, I'm just going to make it bigger. And then I'm also going to drop in some text because I want to display what this actually is. So I'm going to make this an H3 3 element this time. And I'm just going to show the product name. And then I'm also going to just drop in the description, okay? Just so it's really visible to the employee. This is a description. Cool. And then we should probably also have the product ID as well. So let's go ahead and drop that in here. So product ID, and we're going to put that right there. Wonderful. So I think this is looking good. We can space this out if we want. So I can put a divider if I wish, just to make it really obvious that, you know, the next item has started. Great. So this is what it looks like now. We can also actually hard code the height of this display container. So I would do so by adding the height as being fixed. And now if I just go ahead and change the height of this, great. And now I could just scroll through them with the height of this component being fixed rather than being dynamic based on how many items we have in the list view that expands the components. Okay, let's carry on. Before we get going to creating the refunds and notifications section that I want to have here, I think let's start with actually importing the data that we can work with. And to do this, I've actually gone ahead and created this file for you so you can literally copy it and drop it into your app. Okay, so for the purposes of this tutorial, we are going to be using a managed database on Retool. However, of course, in a real life situation, you'd probably want to hook this up to your actual real database. I've gone ahead and written some code to create a table for the customer. So each customer is going to be represented by a customer ID, a contact name, title, address, where they live, and a way to contact them. I've also done one for the employee, which is kind of like the customer. However, it has more information as each employee at my company has an employee ID, a first name, last name, title. We also store their birth date, you know, just for fun, if we want to send them some birthday notifications, their hire date, as well as where they live and how to contact them, as well as their company photo. Next, we have the product. So all the products in our inventory, which we have given an ID, a product name, a description, how much they cost, and how many units of these we have in stock, as well as a photo of the product. Next, we have the actual order. So when a customer makes an order, we actually use the employee ID that we assign to our employee to find out which employee is in charge of that order or took the order, the customer ID that we made earlier to find out which customer made this order. And then we also have the order date, the required date by which they need the order by, the ship date, the ship address, as well as the charge ID that is going to come from Stripe so that we can make the refunds if we want. Okay? And lastly, we just have the order detail, as this is the sales order, but we don't actually know how many items are in the order or anything. So here we have the product ID, the unit price, and how many of that product we got, as well as if there was a discount applied. So this is just, of course, sample data for this tutorial. Please feel free to use it. It's nothing serious. This is just for tutorial purposes. It's a fake database that I have made. Okay, so every order can have as many order details as I want. Next up, we go about inserting data into each of these tables. So this is how you would do it. You would use the insert into keyword. You'd select the table. You then pick out all the columns essentially that you want to insert data into, and then you do it by using the values keyword and inserting the data in the same order as the above. Okay, so I did this for the employees table, the products table, the customer table, the sales order table, as well as the order detail table. Now, I won't be going into how to write these SQL queries, as this is not an SQL tutorial, okay? If you want to check that out, there's plenty of resources on the freeCodeCamp channel for you to have a look at, so please go right ahead. Okay, so all I'm going to ask you to do, as I said, is just copy all of this like I'm doing right now. So copy it, and then back in here, let's get up the bottom tab, and I want you to write a new resource query. This time it's going to be to the manage database. So go ahead and search for the managed database. You should have one in your Retool. And just go ahead and paste it all in like so and hit save and run. Okay, so I'm just going to make this a little bit bigger for you. And great. You should see a pop-up that says query 1 has ran successfully, and you will see the related tables in here. So those are all the tables in your managed database. I have a few more as I've added some tables to a different tutorial, but as long as you have these, that should be fine. That should have worked. So all your tables should be in here along with all the columns that essentially make them up. Okay, so that's quite useful for us. Let's just go ahead and rename this to add data. So it's very easy for us to know which query is for doing which thing. So great, we've written our query to add data and we've ran it. So we've added it to the managed database. This is good. Now that we've actually added our data, we need to retrieve that data. We need to get data, and I'm going to do it by writing another query. So new resource query. This time I'm going to call this get. Let's get the orders, as that is the first table that we created. So get orders like so, or we can call it get sales orders to be more precise, as that is what our table is called. So there we go. I've just chosen to call it the same as the table. You don't have to, but I've done it because we're going to get that table. So make sure you're on the manage DB resource. And all I'm going to do is write select all from, so this is SQL, sales order, right? Because that was what our table was called. So if I now save this and run it, you will see the table show up right here. So those are all our orders. Cool. So that is how you would get a table from our database. Now to actually use this, I would select the table that I want to populate with this data. In this case, it's the order table. And in here, you're going to use this a lot. We're going to get 2 curly braces. So this is something associated with Retool, these 2 curly braces, and we're going to get sales order data. So we're simply getting whatever the query is called, which is get sales orders, and we're getting the data associated with it. And there we go. We have now populated this table with all our orders. Wonderful. Another thing that's handy if you don't know the structure of your data is to use this Explorer tab and look at the state. So as you will see here, you will see get sales orders. And if I open this up, you'll see data, which is an object, and then you'll see all the columns that we can use as arrays. Cool. So I'm just going to minimize that again. Now, another cool thing that we can do for this table, yes, of course, we can customize it. So I can change the colors if I wish. So I can go ahead and make the header background blue, perhaps, to really match the vibe of this overall component. But what I can also do, which is probably more useful, instead of using the table names that come with our database, we can actually visually change them to the user. So we're not going to be changing the database at all. We're just changing them visually to our users. Okay, so I can change this to order ID. So it doesn't have to be just all one word. So just like so. And let's go ahead and do the same for the customer ID. So customer ID, the employee ID, employee ID. So once again, we are not changing anything in the database. We're simply changing what it looks like on this UI. Let's also have the required date, the shipped date, the shipped address. We can just have address really. City, region, postal code, country, and we don't really want the charge ID to be visible, so I can go ahead and hide it like so. That is an option for us too, so I've just gone ahead and hidden it. So now it won't be visible in our table anymore if I scroll through. Okay, it finishes at country. Great. So this is looking good. I'm just going to go ahead and do the same thing for the employees table. So this is a bit of repetition for you. What we did before is create a new resource query. Let's go ahead and call this get employees. And then I'm going to select all from the table employee. So just like so, and hit save and run, which will give me back all my employees when this stops running. And then I'm simply going to select the employees table, and under data, I'm going to use the two curly braces, get the employee's ID, so whatever we called our query, and get the data from it. So here's a preview, and here we see that data. Wonderful. So once again, we can choose to hide as much as we want. As this is the employee tab, I'm going to hide the sensitive information as well as the photo. So I'm going to hide this. I'm going to hide where they live. So just like that, as well as their address and their birthday. But I am going to keep their hire date, their phone number for contact, as well as their first name and employee ID. Wonderful. So there we go. And of course, we can change these dynamically if we wish to. So I'm also going to, while I'm here, just change this to be employee ID, last name, first name, their title. So we have CEO, Vice President, Sales Manager, their hire date, and of course their phone number for contacting them if we need. Great. So this is looking wonderful. Lastly, I'm just going to do the inventory. So once again, let's make a new resource query. I'm going to call this get inventory, just like that. And then we're going to select all from, you guessed it, product this time. So we're going to get all the products, save and run. Great. So now I'm going to highlight the list view this time. So the inventory list and the number of rows. We're going to change this dynamically. So get up your curly braces, use the get inventory data, and then I'm going to select something that I want to pin my length to. I think that should be the product ID, as that is always going to be unique or should be unique. And I'm going to get the length of this array. Okay, great. So there we have it. As we've only got 3 items in our inventory, that has been mapped out to 3 items in my inventory list. Okay, great. So now, how do I feed data into this inventory list? Well, what I would do is I would go ahead and select one of these. So here is the image, and I would go ahead and get the curly braces up again, use the query get inventory data, get the photo, and we're going to loop over each photo in our array by putting in an I. Okay, so there we go. We've looped over everything in our array. So there's our 3 items, and we're going to do the same for the product name. So just in between the H3 tags that we added, I'm going to use the 2 curly braces. I'm going to use the get inventory data query, so the get inventory query to get the data, and then I'm going to get the product name and loop over everything in my array. And the price as well. So I'm just going to go ahead and use the 2 curly braces here, receive a space between USD, use the get inventory query to get the data that comes back, and I'm going to get the unit price, and once again open up our array and use the I to loop over everything in our array. Let's do the same for the description. So 2 curly braces, get inventory query, get the data from it, get the product description, open up our 2 brackets and pass through an I, so we loop over everything. Great. And then finally for the product ID, well, it's the same thing, 2 curly braces, get inventory data, then we get the product ID and we loop over by passing through an I into an array. And finally, get inventory data. This time it's the units in stock. And once again, we pass through an I. Great. So this is looking really wonderful. I'm happy with this. Perhaps we can just move this down a little bit so it's a bit more centered, just like so, as I think that might look a little bit better for the next products in line. Wonderful. Okay, so this is looking good. Let's move on. So under orders, what I said is that if I select a row, I actually want to show the orders that are associated with the order ID. So let's go ahead and do that next. So what I'm going to do is just select this title. Instead of having XX, I'm going to go into this table, which is called order table. So just type out order table like so. And this time we're going to get the selected row. So just find selected row from the drop down, selected row. We're going to get the data order ID. Okay. So now whatever row we select, this will change. As you can see, it's changing as I select a different row. Wonderful. And now using the same approach we did for the inventory, we're going to loop over all of these list items in order to show all the products associated with this order number. So to do this, we're going to have to write another query, this time to get one product. So the resource query, I'm going to call get product. So just one product. And the SQL I need to write for this, it's going to be select all from the product table where the product ID equals any, and then we're going to pass through the product ID that's associated with the order. And we know we can get that data from the order detail table. So let's go ahead and write a query for that. So let's save this as it is. This won't work at the moment, but let's make a new query. This is going to be called get sales order detail. And we're going to do select all from order detail where the order ID equals, and then we're going to go into this table called order table. And we're going to get this selected row data order ID. So just get the order ID. Great. So save this and run it. So if we select on this one right here, you will see that the order associated with it has the product ID of 3. We'll see its price. We'll see how many of them are ordered, and we'll see the discount price. And if I select a different row, you will see that change, and the order details of this order will change. Okay, so now we're going to use this query in order to find out what product IDs are associated with which order ID. And so to do this, I'm just going to use get sales order detail data product ID. Okay, and just make sure that this is in parentheses and save and run it. And great. So that's all working well. We've now linked up the actual product table to the sales order table. So now I can just click on here and go into the get product query. So this one that we wrote right here to get this photo URL. So get product data dot photo, and we're going to just loop over that by passing through an I, just like so. Okay, great. So now let's go ahead and just try click on any one of these rows, and you will see the order number here changes, as well as the picture, as this Samsung Galaxy is associated with this order, but you wouldn't know that from looking at this line. It's only thanks to us getting the product and searching for the product by the order ID that we're able to get all of this extra information. So now I can use this extra information to finish this out. So I'm going to go into the get product query again and get its data, and this time get the product name, as well as the description. So get product data, product description, as well as the product ID. Okay, so I'm just going to get product data, product ID, and loop over like so. Great, and perhaps align it to the right. Now, one thing we're going to have to do is we've obviously hard-coded the length of this list. So go ahead and click on the list, order list view, and we're just going to change this to be however long the get sales order detail data product ID length is. Okay, so in this case, it will be 1, as only one product is associated with this order. But if I go ahead and click on order 10251, you will see there are 2 items associated with this order. Okay, wonderful. So this is looking great. Okay, so I think we're nearly done for this section. I'm just actually going to hard code the height of this as well. So the order table, I want it to be a fixed height. So that is fixed to around about there, which means that I also want to just change the height of this just so they're both kind of equal when we load the app to get started. Okay, I just think visually that's a bit better. But once again, that is totally up to you. That is a choice that you can make. Next up, I want to focus on getting refunds and notifications about those refunds by using the Stripe API and the SMTP API in order to send emails. So let's do it. I'm just going to drag in the container like so. So here we go. And this is going to be for refunds and notifications. Okay, so this time I'm just going to change the header to be a kind of reddish color. So just go ahead and select the container. I'm going to rename this to refund container. And then let's make the header background, I'm going to make it like a red. So maybe something around here is quite nice. And I'm going to hard code the text to be white so that it doesn't give us the default color that it wants. I'm also going to actually add a image here to represent the Mobi company. So this is just a kind of logo that I made. Feel free to not use it, but I'm going to show you that you can also upload pictures into here. So to do that, just go ahead and drag in an image like so. So that's what I have done. And there we go. So there is my company logo that I have made. It's nothing special, but I think for this tutorial, it will do. And I'm just going to make this a little bit smaller and move it right back up here where it was before. So now the refund container. Well, as we know, we're going to have to create refunds, right? And to do this, I actually want to auto-populate a tab for the employee to see exactly what they're refunding. So it's really easy to read for them when they're on the phone, perhaps, and when they're composing emails. So for this, I'm going to put in another container, just like so. I'm not going to have a header for this. So I'm just going to go ahead and hide the header. So just like that. And in here, well, I'm just going to call this text display container, just like that. And it's going to hold the text that we need to see. So I think the employee should have something that says create refund for, and then we're going to have to get the customer associated with this order number, right? So just like we did with the product, we're going to use that order number to fetch data from another table, which is the customer table. I'm going to create a new query. I'm going to call this get customer. And then we're going to select all from the table customer where the cust ID equals the table. So the order table, sorry, because that's what we call this. Custom ID. So actually we can just use the custom ID. We don't need to use the order number. So that makes our life easier. So let's get the order table selected row data cust ID. Okay, so now let's save and run this. And wonderful. So there we go. If we change the selected row, it will get us a different customer based on the customer ID. So in here now, I'm going to use that. I'm going to use the query we wrote called get customer data and get the contact name. Great. And I'm just going to add an S order, just like so. And then in here? Well, we can also use Markdown if we wish. So I can choose to use Markdown for this just to show you a different way of doing things. And I'm also going to use an emoticon, which is a cute little arrow. Okay, so this is just some styling that I think is a bit fun. Great. And this text, well, I want the text to be dark, so let's just go ahead and change that. Okay, so now let's move that out. So create refund for Alan Michael's order, or you can change the name. That is totally up to us. We just have to change the selected row, and this query will automatically run, okay, because we're changing the selected row. Next up, I'm just going to essentially give instructions to the employee on what to do. So I'm just going to put in some text. I'm just going to go ahead and put in some text under here like so. And this text is going to say, so I'm just going to use these as it's easy for me. I'm going to have a 1, which is to check order details. So you're telling the employee to check the order details, and we can actually show them. So this is for order number, and we're going to go into the order table, selected row data, and get the order ID. So it's really obvious which order they're looking at. And the text, I'm just going to do this dark color again. Then we're going to have made on. And then we're going to use the date that this order was made on. So we're going to go into the order table, selected row, order date. However, it will show it in this format as a default. We're going to pass it through into the new date object and change it to a date string. So I'm going to do so by getting the new date JavaScript object and passing through the whole thing. So the order date, and then using the method of toDateString on it. Okay, so there we go. That's a much more readable format for us. And let's just go ahead and put a dot. Now I can use a space. I can space this out simply by adding this snippet of code. So if you feel the need to do that, just go ahead and add that. Okay, great. We can do the same here. Now, the other piece of text that I want to add is when the order was shipped. So I'm going to put this order was shipped on the, and once again, I'm actually just going to get the new date objects, as I now know I need to use it in order to change the format of the date. And I'm going to go into the order table. I'm going to get this selected row. I'm going to get that data, and I'm going to get the ship date. So shipped date. So there we go. And I'm going to use the method of toDateString on it in order to change it to a readable format without the time. So that's when the order was shipped to, and then we're going to put the address. So we're going to once again go into the order table, select row data, and get the ship address. However, it was spelled on the original database, okay, not what we changed it to here. Great, so that's where it was shipped to, and then we're going to also have the shipped city. So once again, get the order table, selected row data, shipped city, and then as well as the country. So just go ahead and add the country too. Okay, so order table, selected row data, ship country. Wonderful. So I think this is looking really good. The next thing I want to do is actually show the items associated with the order again, just in a smaller way. So once again, we're going to use the list view. So let's just drag and drop that in here. Let's call this order mini list view. And this time, I think we'll just show the picture, but a really small picture in here. So I'm just going to drag in an image like so, as well as some text for the title. And we're also going to have the unit price and the quantity as well. So I'm just going to change that to be an individual text one right here. Okay, so now let's get to looping. I'm just going to use the get product query again. So I'm going to get product data photo, open up I and loop, and do the same for the title. So get product data, product name and loop. And I'm just going to change the text to be a darker color so we can read it. Let's perhaps also make this in bold. So I'm just going to put it in these 2 stars. And then we're going to get the product. So once again, use the stars. Get product data, unit price and loop. And just finish that off. Change the text to be darker. And I'm just going to put unit price in front of this. So unit price, just like so. And then we're also going to have the quantity. So maybe we move that down just so we can put this on one line like this. And then the quantity we'll put here. Or perhaps if we want, let's actually make this smaller, as I don't really think it needs to be that big, which means we can move all of these out too. I think that makes more sense for what we are really building here. Okay, it's just a tiny little checkup for our employees so they don't have to go looking through all the data. Okay, and this time we're actually going to get the sales order. So get sales order detail data quantity to find out how much of each product was bought. Okay, so let's just go ahead and put quantity here. Quantity. And then let's change the color of the text. Great. So this is looking wonderful. And of course, we want the order mini list view to change dynamically based on the get sales order detail data product ID length. Great. So now if we click on this order, which I know has 2 products, we should get the 2 products associated with it. Wonderful. Next up, we're going to select the refund type. So for this, I'm actually going to do a select drop down. So I'm just going to drag this in here. This is a new component that we haven't used yet, and it's going to allow us to select something from a drop down that we can use in order to populate our email. Okay, so there we go. I'm going to position the label to be at the top. I'm going to change the default text to be a dark color. And now we can also change the label text itself. So here's the label, and this is going to say to select refund type. Okay, and now we're going to put in the options for this. So I can choose to do this manually, or I can just choose to do the mapped version. And I'm going to put in an array that has the options of late, incorrect, and unsatisfactory. And now for the label, well, let's just go ahead and get up our curly braces, open up an array, and we're going to actually show what the labels of these options are. The first one is going to say order was late by over 10 days. Then the second one is going to say incorrect, damaged order. And the third one is going to say unsatisfactory. And we're going to loop. I'm also going to choose to have the default option as being late. Okay, and once again, I'm just going to change the text of this to be a dark color. So wonderful. And we also need to change some other text, it would seem like. Highlighted foreground, just make it dark. So there we go. So now if we select one, it should show up here, and this is looking good. And then we can select other ones too. And of course, we can change this as much as we want. Okay, great. Let's move on. The next thing I want to put in is the refund amount, and I'm going to do so with a number input this time. So just go ahead and select one of these. We can put a number, or we can actually put currency. So perhaps let's go ahead and put currency, as I feel that makes more sense. So just drag that in, and this should say amount to be refunded. So amount to refund. and then people can just select the amount in US dollars. Okay, so feel free to change the currency if you wish. I'm happy working in American dollars for this project. Next, I'm just going to do a little quick recap, so a little summary. So I'm just going to put refund summary like so. Okay. And then I'm just going to, under this refund summary, just display the actual refund amount, so refund amount. And then whatever the number input or the currency input value is, I want to just display here as a quick summary, and let's put that in bold, and I'm just going to put US dollars. Okay, so there we go. We can even have US dollars in here to make that bold too. Great. And once we've kind of checked all this, I just want to have a button. So I'm going to add in a button to actually commit the refund. So let the refund happen. So let's just go ahead and put a button in here and put in a button. Let's call this refund, and I'm just going to make it green. Okay, so I'm going to make it green. Perhaps let's make it a little bit lighter too. So there we have our refund button, and let's also change the text to be white. Wonderful. So I feel this is done. I'm quite happy with this. Okay, great. Now let's use this information to compose an email, so we can send an email as well as commit the refund. And we'll be using the Stripe API in order to hook this up to the refund button to actually make that refund happen back onto the charge. But first, like I said, let's do the email. So let's put in another container. I'm just going to work in a container in here. Once again, I'm just going to get rid of the heading, so we don't need to show the header for this. I'm going to search for a component called text input. So I'm just going to use the text input for this, just like so. Change the label to be at the top. So I'm just going to change the position to be top. And I'm just going to essentially change the label to be 3 compose email as step number 3 for the employee. Okay. And let's also go ahead and put another input for the actual email. So it's going to be a text input this time. I'm just going to whack that in here. And this is just going to say email. And we can have a placeholder that just says info@test.com. Okay, great. So there we go. I'm going to change the color of this container. In fact, this should probably be called email container. So email container. And the color of this, well, I'm just going to make it a really light red. So just like so. Wonderful. And now I don't want this to be auto, I want it to be fixed. I'm just going to drag it so it's always the same length, just like that. Okay, let's maybe make it a little bit bigger. And that means I can move this down to the bottom. And I'm also going to have a big button. So let's go ahead and create and add a button here. And this button is going to span all the way here. I'm going to change the text to send email. And I'm going to change this to be red. Okay, so all of this section is kind of red. And in here, well, I'm actually going to write a JavaScript transformer for the email text because we're going to have to write a few things in here. So I'm going to change this to be email text. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to define a message that we're going to return. Okay, so my message is going to be, I'm just going to use some backticks for this. Dear, and then we're going to get the get customer data contact name, but comma, I am sorry that your order was, and then we're going to have a reason from our selected options, so whatever we select. So I'm going to actually get it from this select. I'm going to call this the refund select input. So now we can actually grab the refund select input and get its value. So we can display it, making sure that this is actually in 3 curly braces this time. Okay, so just make sure that looks like that, otherwise it won't get picked up properly. And then let's put please rest assured that your refund of, and then once again, curly braces, double curly braces now, so it should be 3 in total. And we're going to get the refund amount of the number input, so currency one value, US dollars, has been authorized and shall be with you in 1 to 5 working days. Okay, and then let's put have a wonderful day. Great. So that is our full message. And now let's go ahead and just return the message. Okay, so that's what will be returned when we use the email text transformer. Great. So I think we actually need to space this out from the curly braces like so. So just like that. Great. So now it's being picked up. So let's save this. And now all I'm going to do is in here, under the default text, I'm going to get the email text value. Great. Perhaps the text area is actually better for this. So let's go ahead and do that. And once again, get the email text value. Okay, so I think maybe that's a bit better. So just go ahead and delete that text input. And I'm also going to hard code the auto growth with content. So I'm going to change this to be 14, just so it's a little bit bigger, and just move it up here. And now change this label to be 3 compose email. Wonderful. So this is looking so much better. And just align that email to go to the right. Okay, so that is looking good. We can of course mess around with this as much as we want. That part is totally up to us. And now perhaps let's just make that auto. Great. Now let's get to hooking this up. So the first thing I'm going to do is just go to Stripe. So if you haven't used Stripe before, please go ahead and sign up to the developer portal. I'm just going to go ahead and sign in. So just go ahead and sign in like that. This is what it should look like once you've signed up and you are returning back as a user. And under here, so here's the URL that you should be able to see. And the test data tab is where we're going to be doing our magic. So under payments is where you can actually create a new payment, and you would do so by selecting this here. So for example, I can make a fake payment of £340, and then we can actually just go ahead and put in some test card information. So if you go ahead and search for Stripe test cards, then this should come up with this documentation right here. And we can essentially use this fake card number. So copy that and then paste it in here, and then just put anything in the future. So I'm going to put 2025, just like so, and put 1, 2, 3. Okay, so the future will be 25. So, oops, we need a description. So mobile phone, as well as the zip code, and click submit. Okay, great. And then if you view the details, so just go ahead and view the detail, you will see a fake charge ID. So the ID that we need is this one right here. This is the charge ID. It starts with CH. And if you look in here, I've actually given the same charge ID to all of my sales orders. Okay, so this charge ID is what we're going to be using to make a refund. So hopefully you understand how I got that charge ID now. So I'm just going to go ahead and go back to here. And I'm going to create a new resource query. And I'm just going to go ahead and create a new resource. So I'm just going to go back in here, create new resource, and look for Stripe. Now I'm just going to call this Mobi app Stripe. And then the API key. Well, to get this, we're going to have to find our API key, right? So let's go ahead and shut this down. I'm going to search for API, developer API keys. And here is my key. So this is the one I'm going to need. I'm going to copy this one. So copy it. Please go ahead and make your own, of course. And I am just going to, under here, paste that in and test the connection. And connection successful. I'm going to create a resource. Okay. So great. I'm going to go back to resources, go back to my app, hit refresh, as we're going to need to load that new resource in here. Create a new resource query, search for the Mobi app Stripe resource. And under here, we're going to have to search for an operation. That is going to be a post to a refund. So I'm just going to search for that in here. It's a post request. I'm going to post a refund. So that should probably be down here. Just make sure to find the correct one, as there is a lot in here. Is this post to charges, getting the charge refund? Okay, and the charge, well, it's going to be, we're going to go into the order table. We're going to get the selected row, data, and the charge ID. Okay, so at the moment, as this is demo, all our charge IDs are the same, but each one of these rows should really have a different charge ID in the real life. And then we're going to have to send through the amount we want to refund. So we're going to use the currency one value. So this component value, okay? And we're just going to save that. And I'm just going to rename this to post refund, and to on success, so we want to know that this worked, I'm going to add just some confetti. Okay, so some confetti will be thrown in the air if this works. So let's go ahead and try this out. I'm just going to go ahead and select an order, so the first one. This is for this order, and as you can see, there's one item of quantity 1 and then the unit price. So I'm just going to go ahead and refund, let's say, $100 from it. And then of course we need to link this up to the query that we wrote. So I'm just going to go ahead and on the button, I'm going to add an event handler, which is to control the query post refund. So now let's go ahead and click that button, and ta-da, that has worked as the confetti has run. And if you look down here, you will see, amazing. So this is the response that we get. Let's go ahead and try another one. So I'm just going to select perhaps this line. So there we go. We have the unit price. Of course, this unit price does not correlate to the charge ID because we just put in a random number. However, I'm just showing you how this works. And if I was to refund $50 this time to whatever the charge ID has on it and refund, ta-da, that has worked. And you will see that a refund has been made to the same charge ID essentially. Like I said, this is not realistic. I'm using test data. You will see that that has worked. Okay, that is actually the total amount refunded now, because I refunded 100 earlier. I just refunded 50 and I refunded 100 earlier when I was testing this out as well. So that is the total amount refunded, and that was the original amount that we had. Great. So that is now working. Let's carry on. So we've hooked this up to the Stripe API. Next, I want to hook this up to actually sending an email. So let's do that next. I'm just going to minimize all of this right now. Okay, and we don't need this anymore either. Okay, so to do this, we're going to get another new resource. This time I'm going to use the Gmail resource. So let's go ahead and actually go in here and create that resource specifically for this project. I'm going to create a new resource, and then we're going to search for the SMTP resource. Let's call this Mobi mailing SMTP. The host for this is going to be smtp@gmail.com. The port is 465, and then I'm just going to use Anya at freeCodeCamp.org. Okay, so this is the email that it's going to be sent out from essentially, and then I'm going to have to put in my password. Okay, so just go ahead and do that too. Okay, and just test the connection. You might get some errors even though you're putting your correct password. So just check your email and just confirm it was you, and then just go ahead and allow access to less secure apps. Okay, so that has now been done, which means that if we go back in here now and try that again, so test connection, that should work. Okay, so great. That's how you would fix that. Let's go ahead and just remove all these, and make sure to perhaps maybe if you want, and of course if you don't feel safe doing it, then you don't have to. There are other options that you can use for mailing. Okay, great. So that has now worked. Let's go back here and refresh this page. So just reload it. in order to get that latest resource. And then on this query 10, I'm going to now use the Mobi mailing SMTP, the to email. Well, that's just going to be the text input to. So let's get text input to value. The subject is going to be regarding order. And then let's get the order table selected row data order ID. And then the body is just going to be the text area 1. So let's get text area 1 value. Okay, and once again on success, let's just get up some confetti. Wonderful. So that is good. And let's save this as something. So save that and let's rename this to send email. And on click of this button, we're going to trigger it. So add an event handler, send email, and great. So now let's test it out. I'm just going to send this to Anya at freeCodeCamp.org and send the email. And wonderful. That seems to have worked. Let's go check it out. Great. There we go. So that is working. We've done everything that we needed to do for this employee app. This is the final product. I hope you've enjoyed coding this along with me, and I hope you're ready for the second part of this course where we're going to learn how to make an admin panel where we not only read data, but we also add data, delete data, and edit data too. So let's do it. Okay, so let's start building our admin app, or in other words, our Mobi Manager application, as I've chosen to call it. So let's go ahead and create that new app. I'm going to choose to call it Mobi Manager Application, just like so, and go ahead and create that app. So once again, you'll be given this boilerplate default setup, and I'm just going to delete this, and I'm going to delete the query that we have here. Okay, great. So now that we have done that, I want to have two main components essentially. One is for viewing our employees as a list, as well as deleting employees or editing their details if we wish. And on the right, I'm going to have an inventory section where we can see all of our inventory, as well as delete lines or add new lines. Okay, so this is going to be a great example of how to add data, delete data, and edit data from our database. So let's do it. We are, of course, going to be using the exact same database that the employee database is using, as is frequently seen in companies. So first off, I'm just going to create a container. So there we go. That is our container. And let's go ahead and call this employees, just like so. And I'm just going to make the header of this container a different color. So I'm just going to select this kind of reddish color right here, and I'm just going to make the text white. Okay, so there we go. And now I'm going to drop in another container. This time this is going to be for the inventory. So let's go ahead and change this to say inventory, making sure to spell it correctly. And I'm going to change the header of this to also be a different color. Let's go with a greenish color this time that I've kind of pre-selected. So I like this green right here. Okay, and let's also make the font white. Wonderful. So we did say that we want a list view here. So let's go ahead and select the list view container, just like so, and just drop it in. So I've dropped that in here. We can, of course, rename these if we wish. So let's go ahead and rename this to employee container. And then we're going to have this as inventory container. But of course, you don't have to. That is just my choice. Now on the list view, I'm going to actually rename this to be employee list view. Okay, and in here, I'm just going to have an image of the employee as well as their name. So we're going to have their name here. Let's just go ahead and make this an H3 element. I think that should be fine with their name. And then let's change the text of this to be a dark color, just like so. I'm just going to make it this dark grayish. I'm also going to put in an icon. So this icon is going to be to delete this employee. So let's go ahead and find a delete icon. So this one right here, and then change the color of it to be once again a dark color. And I'm just going to make this a lot smaller as well. So there we go. And how about the name here? We can make this as small as we wish. Okay, so great. And then let's have some text, which is going to be for whatever the title is. So we can have something like title here. And of course, let's change the text again to a darker color. Just make it the same. And then we've got the title. Another thing we can have is the employee ID. So let's go ahead and change this to be employee ID. And I'm just going to put this on the other side. So I'm just going to drag it in here like so. Then we're going to have the address. So let's just change this to address and make this in bold. And then first line of the address and whatever really address related things we have in here. So I think it was city. We can of course change these. Then we have the region. We also have the country and postcode. So let's go ahead and add that. Country, postal code. Okay, and perhaps let's also have a divider, because why not, just under the title, just to make it a little bit more visually appealing, as we want to space out the address from the title. And then I'm also going to have a button here so that we can edit. So I'm going to have this as edit and make it red, so we can edit the employee. Okay, great. So this is looking good. I like the look of that. Now let's go ahead and get our data. So I'm going to create a new resource query, and this is going to be to get all the employees. Okay, so this is going to be to our managed database, just like so. I'm going to select all from employee and save and run. Okay, great. Which means we can now populate this list with that. So I'm actually going to get the employee data. Let's go by the employee ID and then length, okay, as that should be unique. So we've got 3 employees. That looks good. And now the picture here, I'm going to once again go into get employee data, get the photo, and then loop by passing through an I, and do the same for the name. So once again, get employee data. We're going to get the first name this time and loop. And then I'm just going to put a space and get the employee data, last name too, and again, loop. So actually we need to put the first one in curly braces and finish that off, and then open up our curly braces again, and then just put a space. Wonderful. The title, well, we're just going to go into get employee data once more, get the title and loop, and then the employee ID. Let's go into the employee data, get the emp ID and loop. Okay, so you're getting the gist now. The first line of the address, get employee data, and then this time it's going to be the address and loop. Space that out. The city, so once again, get employees data, city and loop. This time the region, so get employee data, region and loop. Country, you can of course display as much information or as little as you want. That's part's totally up to you. You have all the data to your disposal. And finally the postal code, so get employee data, postal code and loop. Okay, now I'm actually going to put in another divider so I can put the contact detail and the birth date of this employee, because this is admin level stuff, right? We didn't want every employee to see it, but as an admin, you are privy to this information. So I'm simply going to put the phone number. So let's put phone and then go into the get employee data, get the phone and loop. Let's change this text as well to be a darker color, making sure that's the same as the others. And then I'm just going to copy paste this and replace the second line with hired. And then we're going to get into the hired date. And then we probably want to pass this through the new date object. So let's go ahead and do that. Get up our new date object and then get the method of toDate string and just call it. Okay, so there we got the hired date. And then let's have the, and now let's have the birth date too. So birthday. And then this time we're going to get the birth date. Great. So that is our employees. Now that we have done that, let's get to writing our query for updating an employee. But to do that, I'm actually going to show you how to make a modal. So I'm just going to actually minimize this. And instead of having a button, I actually want to change this to be a modal. So a modal pop-up. So just go ahead and drag that in here like so. It looks the same, but has different functionality. So let's just change this to edit. I'm just going to make it a little bit smaller. And once again, just change the color to be red. Okay, but this time when we click on this, it will open up a modal. So let's go ahead and put what we want in this modal. And that is some text to let us know what this modal is all about. So I'm going to change this to say edit employee. Just like so. And of course, change this to be a darker color. Now let's have a text input. Because we're going to have text inputs, we're also going to populate these text inputs with the data from this employee as a default. Okay, so once again, just change the text color and replace it with the one we're using. So our first label, well, this is just going to be the first name of the employee. And as a default value, we're going to go into the get employees data and get the first name and just loop over it. Okay, so that was really easy. And the text is just going to be this darker text. So just like so. Great. So now let's copy and paste this. And this time this is going to say last name. So let's go up here. And I'm just going to change this to say last name. And the default text is going to be the last name. Okay, so hopefully you get what we're doing here. We're going to do the same for the title. So title, and then we're going to have the title of the employee showing up here. We're then going to have the birth date. So let's go ahead and put birth date. This time I'm going to leave it like so though, however, because I think it's quite important to differentiate between the two. So there's our birth date and how it converts to that when we view it on here. But when we enter it, it looks like this. This is going to be the hire date. So let's go ahead and pick out the hire date this time and not the birth date. So hire date from our database. Next, we're going to have the address. So I'm going to put address and then we're going to pick out the address. Next, we're going to have the city. Let's have the city. Pick out the city. And then we're going to have the region. So pick out the region and have a label as region. And then we're going to have a postal code. So let's have postal code and just change this to say postal code. There we go. That's the one we want. Then we're just going to have country. And I'm just going to change to say country. And then the phone number. So phone. Let's change this to phone. And then a URL. So of course you probably would have a photo database for this, but for the sake of this tutorial, I'm just going to link to photos by URLs that are hosted online. Okay, so that's what I've done here. I've essentially got them from Unsplash. So I'm just going to get the photo and this is going to say photo. And lastly, I'm just going to have the employee ID. So this should be a number. So let's go ahead and put number input. So number input, just like so. Stretch this out. Let's change the text. So the contrast text here, and change it to be the same color as all the others. And do it for the actual text too. So there we go. And I'm just going to change it to say employee ID. So employee ID. Great. And now I'm going to get a button. So just put that in here like so. And this is to update. So put that in and change this to update. And on the click of this, we want to run a query, right? And that is to edit or update an employee. So let's call this update employee. And for this, well, we're going to do it to the managed database. And the SQL that we're going to write for this is, so we're going to update employee set first name equals, and then we're going to get, we're going to have to find the text input. It's text input 1. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to get text inputs 1 value. Then we're going to have to set last name, and that is text input 2. So let's get text input 2's value. Then we have to get the title, and you guessed it, that is going to be text input 3. And there it is, text input 3's value. Then we get the birth date. So birth date. Making sure that it's the correct one. So text input value 4, the higher date, which is text input 5 value, the address, which is 6. So let's find text input 6 value, the city, which is text input 7. So let's go ahead and find that one. The region, which is text input 8 value. The postal code, which is 9. So let's find that one. The country, which is 10. So let's find text input 10. Then we've got the phone number, which is 11. So text input value 11. Nearly there. Photos next. Photo. Text input value 12 this time. Then we have the employee ID, which is number input 1. So emp ID, which is number input value 1. Great. And we search for it by the employee ID, which is why we need to put where emp ID equals, and then we're going to get the employee, but based off this right here. So we could go into the get employees and loop, but I think a better way to do this would be to, I'm just going to save this, minimize that, is to get this employee ID. So in fact, I'm going to split this out and I'm going to make another. So I'm just going to duplicate this and I'm just going to have the employee ID in its own text. So just like so, and move that here. And I'm just going to have the label as a separate one. Okay, so that's what I've done. I'm going to move this up here now and space that back up here and just select all of these and move them up a little bit too. So now I can grab text 14 value and search for the employee to update by that. Okay, so now I'm going to save, and what I'm going to do is actually Now add an event handler to this, but on the success of this, I'm just going to add some confetti so that we know this has worked. So save that and click on the button, and now add a transformer, so an event handler, and the query for this is going to be to update the employee. So great. So now let's check it out. I'm just going to change Sarah's name to have an H at the end, update, and great. So that has worked. And next we need to actually refetch that data. So on success, we send some confetti, and we also rerun the query to get employees. Okay, so we're refreshing that data. We're getting it again. Just run that. And great. So that has now been updated, and Sarah Davis has actually dropped to the end. Okay, wonderful. So this is all looking great. I'm really happy with this. Perhaps we can even give it some spacing in between each of these. So I'm just going to add some spaces just like so. You can do so, or you can choose not to. That part is totally up to you. Okay, great. So now to delete an employee. So for this, I'm actually going to write another query, and that is going to be to delete employee, just like so. And to delete the employee, I'm going to use the delete keyword from the employee database, where the emp ID equals the text 14 value. So once again, we're just using the value of this text right here. Okay, so that's all I'm going to do. And on success, once again, I'm just going to add some confetti so you know this works. And we're also going to have to refetch all that data. So get employees again and save. Okay, so now let's try and delete someone from here. I'm just going to go ahead and attach that to this icon right here. So add an event listener of delete employee. So I'm just going to click on here. Let's get rid of this so we see what this looks like. Delete Don Funk, and great. So Don Funk is now deleted. To add him, we would have to go back into our database and re-add that data. Okay, but he's gone for now. You can, of course, add a button to add new employees in here, but we're just going under the assumption that this data is coming from elsewhere, and we as managers just have the ability to edit the employee or delete them, okay? So that is the assumption that I am going under. To add new things, I'm going to show you how to do that in the inventory. So once you gain that knowledge, you can apply it to this section too. So let's do it. For the inventory, however, I'm going to write a new query, which is to get inventory. So get inventory, just like so. And this time I'm going to select all from product, okay? And save and run. So just go ahead and do that. And I'm going to get a table. And as we are on this query, it should populate with data from that query, okay? Wonderful. Now, again, the text here is very light, so just go ahead and change this. I'm just going to change it in here to be a darker color, just like so. And that looks good. Wonderful. So now that we have that, I'm going to show you how to create a custom column on this table. So I'm just going to call this inventory table. And I'm going to create a new column. This is going to be to delete. So hence I'm just going to call it delete. And the column type is actually going to be a button. So let's go ahead and search for the button, just like so. And the value is just going to say delete. Okay, so great. And we're going to have to add an on click. However, we need to write the query for that. I'm just going to move this up so it's the first right here. Wonderful. Next, I'm also going to add an option to add an inventory item. So once again, I'm going to have a modal. So let's go ahead and search for the modal. I'm just going to pop it in here. I'm going to make this green. So just like that. And I'm going to change the text. Perhaps this maybe this a little bit lighter to just the word add. Okay, so just like that. Great. And on this modal, well, just like we did before, I'm going to have to create some inputs, right? But this time we're just going to leave them blank. So let's go ahead and create. I'm just going to drag in some text in here, and this is going to say add a product. So add a product, just like so. And then I'm just going to put in some inputs. So this is going to be let's have the ID first. So let's put that in here. I'm just going to drag that over. Let's not forget to change the text of this to be a darker color. So I'm just going to whack that in here. Same for this one. So let's go down here and change the contrast color, the label, as well as the actual text as well. So there we go. We have a label here that's meant to be for our ID. So I'm just going to change this to say product ID. And what is cool is that we can make this required. So I can just go ahead and flip this, and that is now required. Next, let's have a text input. So I'm just going to drag that in here like so. And I'm just going to change the text of this. So once again, I'm just going to change it to be that. And let's change the label of this. I'm going to just change it to be product name, just like so. And I'm going to make this required. I'm also going to have a photo URL, so we can put in a photo of the product itself. Then we're also going to have units in stock. So I'm just going to change this to say units in stock, as well as a unit price, which should be in currency. So let's put in a currency section, just like so. So there we go, and change the text of this as well. And finally, we're going to have a text area. So look for a text area and just drag it in. I'm going to change the label. And this should say product description. And great. And then we're just going to have a button that will let us add to our database. So once again, I'm just going to put add, just like that. And let's write our queries. So I'm going to write a new resource query, this time to add product. And this time, well, this should be a flashback to our database that you saw on GitHub. We're going to use insert into, then we're going to find the table called product. Okay. We're going to open up a parenthesis and describe the columns. So we're going to have the product ID, the product name, making sure to spell it exactly the same as I am, the product description, the unit price, units in stock, and the photo. Okay, and then the values that we're going to insert, which are the number input to value, the text input 13 value, the text area 1 value, the currency 1 value, and the text input 14 value. Great. And on success, we are going to get off our confetti. Then let's also rerun the data. So get the inventory again. And then let's also shut the component. So control component. And let's get the modal 2. And I just want to close it. Okay, great. So let's save that. And now let's go ahead and try this out. I'm going to put product 4. Product name is going to be test. Should change the text of this as well. So just make that darker. Test mobile. Let's put in a random URL. So just copy the link address of that. Paste it in like so. Just going to change the text of this too. Units in stock, I'm going to put 12. Let's say this costs $400. And then let's just put a test. And of course, let's not forget to add the units in stock, which is number input 3. Okay, and now let's hook this up to an event handler. So this is going to run the query add product, and then I'm just going to minimize this so you can see, hit add, and great. So that has worked. We have got the inventory again, and that has been added for us. Wonderful. Now, one last thing is we want to run the delete query. So once again, let's get up our queries. Let's make a new query. I'm going to call this delete product, just like so. And I'm going to delete from product where product ID equals, I want to go into the inventory table. So the inventory table, selected row data, product ID. Okay, once again on success, I'm going to show some confetti. So add that, and I'm also going to rerun the data. So control query, select the query, get inventory again. Great. So those two are added. Let's click save. And now let's link this up. So the delete column, on click, we want to run a query, and that is the delete product query. Great. So now let's test it out. I'm just going to delete the one we made, and wonderful. So great. We can now add things, delete things, and update things in our database. This is looking wonderful. And now finally, I'm just going to build a revenue tracker. So all I'm going to do is just drag in another container just like so, drag it over all the way to the end. I'm going to call this revenue tracker. So let's go ahead and put revenue tracker, and let's make it a fun blue because why not? So I'm just going to select the actual container, and then the header, I'm just going to select this blue color right here. Okay, and now I'm going to put in a tabbed container. So let's put in another tabbed container just like this. Okay, because we're going to have a table, and then we're going to actually show some historical data too. So I'm actually going to write a new query. So resource query. This time it's going to be a query JSON with SQL, and we're going to essentially select all from, and then we are going to get the order detail, but we're also going to use the method of format data as array. So we're making it into an array. We're going to pass through the get order detail data. But of course, for this to work, we're going to have to, you guessed it, get the order detail. So I'm just going to save this. It won't work. And let's create a new resource query called get order detail, just making sure to spell it exactly the same way as we did. And this is going to be, once again, to our managed database. We're going to select all from order detail and save and run. Okay, so now back in here, that's what we're getting. And we're going to join it with the sales orders. So once again, we're going to format data as array. We're going to pass through get sales order. So all of the sales orders. So this one is easy, just save that. We did in the previous part of this tutorial. We're going to get sales orders. This is going to be a managed database. We're going to select all from sales order and save and run. Okay. And then orders, order ID. We're going to match both by order ID. Okay. If we save and run this, ta-da! We get all that data, but it's been joined together. I'm going to show you what it looks like in a table, as I think that'd be better. I'm going to call this joined revenue data. And then I'm just going to put in a table right here using the joined revenue data. Okay, so there we go. And we can even add our own custom column if we wish. So I'm going to go ahead and just call this total amount. And then the value we're going to put in is just the current row quantity multiplied by the current row unit price. Okay, and that will show us the total amount, so the unit price multiplied by this quantity value. Okay, great. And we can even move that here. So let's go ahead and rename this all transactions. And on view 2, well, on view 2, I want this to be historical data. So I'm just going to put historical data, and then let's delete view 3. So now under here, what I'm going to do is use the graph. So just like so, just drag that in like that. And as the x-axis, we're going to have the order date because it's going to be historical. And then we're going to group by the ship country. So let's find the ship country. We're going to stack the group data. And we're going to add a new data set. So just double click on that. And let's call this joined revenue data. And in here, well, we're going to format data as object this time. We're going to pass through the joined revenue data. And we're going to get the unit price. We're going to go into it and look for the unit price. We're going to map whatever is in the array to the joined revenue data quantity. Okay, just making sure that we are actually including the amount of items that were purchased, okay, each time. And just make sure to actually spell everything correctly. Okay, so there we go. That is what you need to do. Just going to put order date on here. And the x-axis, let's make this a date. The y-axis is going to be the total revenue. And now I'm just going to actually hide all the rest of these. And wonderful, we have done it. Okay, so all our transactions and then our historical data. And of course, we can make this as big, as small as we want. But now we know exactly how much money was made on each day. So on July the 9th, for example, $696 were made. And if we look in here on July the 9th, that makes sense as we sold 2 items at the unit price of $348. So the total amount was $696. Okay, and finally, it's time for our last app, again using the same database, and that is to build a developer portal, an internal tool for developers to essentially get endpoints to the Moby database. So let's do it. I'm going to create a new app, and this time I'm going to call it Moby Developer Application, just like so, and hit that button. Again, we're just going to delete all the default things that come with this app. So I'm going to delete this query too. Now our developer portal, I'm just going to actually drag in some text so that people know what this is. I'm going to use an H1 element this time. Let's just go ahead and do that. I'm just going to call this developer portal, just like so, and just drag that over. And then let's also just have a little subtitle so everyone knows what this is for. This is going to say get endpoints to the Moby database. Okay, wonderful. And for this, I'm going to use another cool component that we haven't used yet, and that is the collapsible container. So let's just go ahead and drag that in here, and wonderful. Now this first container, well, let's just go ahead and select it. I'm going to change the header of this to have this kind of bluish color that I have chosen. Okay, just like that. And the title of this is going to be for the endpoint to get all our sales orders. So I'm just going to go ahead and change this to get sales orders, just like so. Okay. Now in here, I'm just going to drag in some text. This is going to say, I'm going to use Markdown this time, get sales orders API endpoint to retrieve all sales orders. And next I'm going to create a table. So I'm just going to drag in a table like so. And instead of having this, I'm just going to write my own data for this. So I'm going to open up an array to create my table. And then I'm just going to create my first object. My first object is just going to have the method type. And this is going to be a get request. So I'm just going to put get as the HTTP request method. And the end point is going to be sales, making sure that's in quotes, orders, for example, and then we're going to have the action copy. Okay, so I'm just making what I imagine a developer portal might look like when it comes to viewing the different endpoints we can have to a database. Okay, so of course this is just for demo purposes. Next, we might be able to filter, so I'm just going to add that, and the endpoint is going to be sales orders, and then we're going to pass through an ID as a parameter, which is going to have a value. Okay, and then let's just have a few more. So this time I'm going to have get pagination, endpoint is going to be sales orders, and then we're going to have the page, for example, 2, and a limit of 10. We could even make this just for anything to do with sales orders, right? So if we want to add to the sales order, we could do that as well. It would just go to the sales orders endpoint, just like so. The same for if we want to update. So this would be a put request, and then we'd have to actually find whichever order we want to update essentially. And then we're also going to have a delete, right? Which again, we're going to have to supply the order that we want to delete. Great. So that's what it would look like. Let's actually go ahead and change this to sales orders, API endpoint to retrieve, add, edit, and delete sales orders. Right? I think that's fine. I'm happy with that. Okay, and I'm just going to make this a little bit bigger so that everything fits. I'm just going to make this a little bit bigger too, so that everything fits. Great. And I'm just going to change this to get, post, put, delete, sales orders. Wonderful. So I've said this is an action. However, I actually want to change this to a button. So let's go ahead and do that here. I'm going to change this to a button. Let's search for button, just like so. Wonderful. Now, what do I want to copy? Well, I want to actually copy all of the data that we supposedly get back. So I'm just going to go ahead and do this by going on click, copy to clipboard. And next, I'm just going to put in another component in here. So let's just go ahead and make this a little bit smaller. Next up, we're just going to drag in a table and we're going to populate this with our get sales order data. So let's go ahead and write that query down here. I'm going to create a query. I'm going to call it get sales order data. So get sales order data. I'm going to make sure that this is to the managed database, so the same one, and I'm going to select all from sales order, and save and run. Okay, great. And now that means, let's go ahead and get rid of that for now, that we can populate this table with our get sales order data just like so. So we've got the query and we got the data that comes back from the query. Great. I'm actually going to go ahead and put this in a tabbed container. So just dragging that over here. And the first view that we're going to have is to see the sample response. And let's have the second view as the table if someone wants to see the data as a table. So I'm just going to go ahead and put table like that. And then let's get rid of view 3 as we don't need it. So now under table, I'm just going to drag in this table just like so that we can view the data. Just like so. I'm just going to make it smaller just so it fits on the same line. And under sample responses, I'm going to get the JSON Explorer element. So just like so, put that in here. And perhaps actually let's make this stretch out all the way as we can take up this blank space right here. I'm just going to stretch that out to the bottom as well. Okay, and the same for the table. And now instead of having this sample data, we're going to get rid of that. And I'm going to show you how you can generate an API for demonstration purposes thanks to Retool. All you're going to do is just click on Get Started just like so, and we're going to upload a CSV. And to do this, we're actually going to download this table right here. So just go ahead and download the data as a CSV file and then drag it in here and hit Next. And there we go. So now that we've got that, I want you to click Next. And let's go ahead and call our API the same thing that we called it here. So sales orders, and everything will suddenly make sense and generate the API. And great. Okay. So you will see this, which we've already written here. Okay. So here we have all the endpoints to this generated API. I'm just going to copy this endpoint URL, go on the sample responses and create a new resource query. This time we're going to call it get sales orders or order data from REST API. We're going to use the REST query and we're going to get from this endpoint URL and click save and run. Okay, so great. So now I can use that on the sample response. So let's go ahead and use get sales order data from REST API data. Wonderful. So that is looking good. So now let's go ahead and link up these. We're going to copy this URL. So once again, that endpoint, and let's get rid of the sales order bit as that is the endpoint that we need to add in addition to this. Okay. So then I'm just going to go into table 1 and get the selected row data endpoint, okay, and kind of add that all together, but we'd have to get rid of the dots, but perhaps let's just do that as I think that looks quite cool. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete these dots from here. Okay, we could of course done this in JavaScript too, but to save time, I'm just going to delete them from this hard copied text. Wonderful. So now if we click on one of these, you will get the full URL. Great. And then if we paste it in here like so, ta-da, we get the first sales order. Okay, so this is just kind of for demo purposes. Of course, this is not live data. It's just what we generated from a CSV right here. We can, of course, do this for all the major endpoints. So we've got the sales orders. Let's go ahead and do customers as well. So I'm just going to copy and paste the entire thing. And then let's change the title of this to customers. Let's also change the color of this. I'm just going to make it a lighter green, just like this color right here that I have pre-picked out. Let's change what it says in here. So this time, let's have it say customers, API endpoint retrieve, add, edit, and delete customers. And then of course, we're gonna have to change them all in here to customers, get customers. Let's also have to add a customer to the customers, pagination, customers, edit a customer in customers, and delete a customer from customers. Okay, so that is looking good, and it's going to copy that, but of course we need to get the right URL. So I'm going to actually get rid of the data from this table. So just go ahead and delete that. Let's get up our little dashboard for making queries, and this time we're going to make another query. It's going to be called get customers. It's going to be to our managed database, and we're going to select all from customer, save and run. Okay, so we've got that. So now we can use it here for our table, get customers data, just like so. Going to minimize this at the bottom. So we're getting all of our customers. I'm going to download this again, and let's generate a new API. So I'm just going to actually refresh this page, and I'm going to drag that in here like so. I'm also going to click next. Okay, so that is actually all of our customer data. And then I'm going to click next again. Let's call our API customers, generate the API, and great. So now let's copy that, get our sample response. And once again, we're going to have to write a new query. I'm going to call this get customers data from REST API. We're going to write a REST query. We're going to get our customers, save and run. Okay, so now I'm going to minimize this, and that is what I'm going to use for the value here. Get customer data from REST API data, just like so. And the action here, well, the action here is going to be to copy. Let's get our action. Table 3, customers. Okay, so this is looking good. That is table 3. So let's check it out. Let's copy this one. And indeed, if we are selecting the right row, it does copy that to our clipboard. Okay, great. So we have 2. I'm just going to do one more, but you kind of get the gist now. So once more, I'm just going to copy the whole thing and paste it like so. This time I'm going to have for employees. I'm going to change the color of this to be a kind of reddish color. This time this is going to say employees, API endpoint retrieve, add, edit, and delete employees. Just get rid of that. And once again, I'm just going to make a query. So resource query, call this get employees. This is going to be to the managed database this time. I'm going to do select all from employee, run this, minimize this. Now in the table, I'm going to get the data from get employees. So just use get employees data. And now we're going to, you guessed it, download this table, go back here, refresh this page, and then I'm just going to drag in that table like so. And once again, I'm just going to hit next, scroll down, hit next, and let's call this employees and generate the API. Once again, now let's copy this. And now we're going to have to edit all the data in table 5 right here. So let's just change this out to be employees. And once again for here, employees, 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 employees and employees. Okay, so that's all done. And on the action, well, that is fine. And we are getting the selected row. So in fact, we might need to change this to be 1N. So let's go ahead and perhaps replace that just like so, and then get rid of this. And great. So now let's test it out. Let's select this row right here. Let's copy this and paste it in, and wonderful. That seems to work. We might have to change it for this API, as I think we just used the other one. So let's just see, check if it works. Select the row, copy this, paste it in. Okay, that does not work. We clearly used the wrong API. Let's see if we can get back our other one. If I just go back, that has not seemed to work. So I'm just going to remake this API. Hit next. Hit next again. Call this customers, generate the API, copy this API, and then in here on table 3, on the action, just paste the whole thing like so and delete the customers part. Okay, so great. So now let's select a row, copy it, paste it in, and that now works. We are getting all the customers. Great. So there you go. One last thing we're going to do, and that is actually use this API. So this one right here on the employees. So once again, it's just this one, and then we're going to get this, make a new query. So new resource query. I'm going to call this get employees from REST API. This is going to be to a REST query. We're going to paste that in and just put in employees. Okay, and save and run. Great. So that brings back our data. And in here, I'm just going to use get employees data. Wonderful. Okay, so you get the gist now. I'm not going to carry on and do all of them, but we have our 3 right here for the developer portal, and I'm happy with that. Okay, and that's it. I hope you've learned a lot in this tutorial, and I really hope you've gained some skills and knowledge in building internal tools using low-code solutions.